to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. A very common question that I get online is, what is the difference between Tameran Wicca and Kemetic Reconstructionism, or just Kemeticism? So today I'm going to explain what each one of these is. In very general terms, if you really want to get in depth, in Circle of the Sun, I give you a little bit of history on how did Egyptian paganism really come back around, the history of the revival, and especially how it fits into the pagan revival in general. But also, side by side, what are some of the similarities and differences between Tameran Wicca and Kemeticism? But today I'm going to give you just an overview. And as always, if you want to talk to people who practice both, if you go on the Following the Sun forum, there are people of both persuasions on there, and they'll be happy to answer questions that you might have. Tameran Wicca the name comes from Tameri, which was Egyptian for the beloved land. That was a name for the mother country. Another word that they would use is Kemet, and that's where Kemetic comes from. Now, Tameran Wicca uses the same basic Wiccan format that you would find in Gardnerian, Alexandrian, eclectic, so on and so forth. You have your Wheel of the Year with your 8 Sabbats. You have God and Goddess duality, casting circles to perform rituals, and it obviously incorporates Egyptian deities and some Egyptian spells and rituals into the Wiccan format. And of course, most often, if you think of the god and the goddess in Egyptian terms, it would be Isis and Osiris. But any couple is fair game. You could have Ra and Ma'at, Ra and Hathor, Ptah and Sekhmet, and so on and so forth. The one drawback that I notice with Tameran Wicca is a lot of the books that have been published for a Tameran Wiccan audience use as their primary source of information the works of E.A. Wallace Budge, who was an Egyptologist from Britain in the late 1800s. He died in, I think, the 1930s. He was a very prolific writer, and one of the things that I like about his books is very often he will include the hieroglyphic original of a text, and then his translation. His translations are a little faulty, but if you're willing to do the work and torture your brain cells, and compare with a modern book on Egyptian grammar, you can kind of reverse engineer some of his work. But for most people, I would say there are a lot of newer books out there that would be much better sources and would make your pagan application of Egyptian archaeology that much better. And that's one of the things that I tried to do in Following the Sun, is provide more information for people who are interested in that. Kemetic Reconstructionism, obviously it is a pagan Reconstructionist faith. It's not the only one out there. There's Celtic Reconstructionism, Roman Reconstruction, I think a Hellenistic one. Obviously it's more purist. They want to use the historical forms and not incorporate so much into a modern system, using the Egyptian calendar, which doesn't match the Wheel of the Year, because obviously what's going on at one time of the year for a lot of North America and Europe or Australia, that's not what would be going on in Egypt at the same time. Depending on which Kemetic group you're talking to, there's some variances in how they use the sources, how they interpret things. It's very interesting. You can take the same ancient text that's been translated, and two different groups are going to apply it to their own rituals in two different ways. And the one pitfall that I see with Kemetic Reconstructionism is there's some of them that they insist on being correct, and so they don't want to talk to the Tameran Wiccan so much because Tameran Wicca, that's borrows too liberally from other things. It's not very pure, and that's unfortunate because I really think there are a lot that each group can learn from each other, and I talk a little bit more about that in Circle of the Sun. Finally, you have your eclectic groups that are, and practitioners that are, you can't really put them into a category of Kemetic or Tameran Wicca. They borrow from all sorts of things. Shamanism, yoga, all sorts of things. And so that's what I see as a third category, your, eclectic Neo-Egyptian kind of groups. Neither one is better than the other. That's something very important I want you to understand, is that one is not going to be absolutely better than the other, but one of them might be a better fit for you. And it's okay to start with one and end up going into another. You could start out Tameran Wicca, and the more you do it, you say, well, you know what, I like sticking with just the Egyptian stuff. Or you might say, you know what, I don't want to have to read all of this stuff. I don't understand, reading all the historical references, and Wicca is a little easier and it fits, especially, if, as I mentioned before, you're in a part of the world where it doesn't make any sense to be celebrating, a feast for, the harvest or whatever when, you're about to start summertime, or vice versa. Me personally, because I live in the South and it's hot half the year minimum, the desert climate, doesn't seem that far off for me. And there are folks who have observed being in the Southwest, California, Nevada, and, Utah and places like that. It's desert over there, so they have a really good frame of reference for, the Egyptian, feasts of the seasons. So it's up to you. And hopefully this will give you a little bit of an understanding of what the main differences are, but the unifying thread through all of them is, faith in the Egyptian gods. However you express it is up to you. Hopefully this will help you with your own Egyptian pagan or Kemetic practice. So for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon, wishing you Sanibti.